Abigail Reed had visited her husband's grave every Sunday for 11 months, and every Sunday the town of Dry Creek watched her do it as if mourning itself were a kind of crime. They had buried Jonah Reed on the far edge of the cemetery, beyond the white fence and below the cottonwoods, where the ground turned hard and uneven. Not with the other men, not beside his kin, they buried him where they put drifters, horse thieves, and men the town wanted to forget. The grave marker was plain. Just his name, the year, and one line no amount of weather had managed to erase. Outlaw. That morning, the men from town were already at work, moving old markers after a spring washout tore through the lower hill. Sheriff Gideon Pike stood near the wagon, boots planted wide, hat low over his eyes, giving orders like the dead still belonged to him. Abigail kept her hands folded in front of her black dress and said nothing. She had learned that in Dry Creek, silence lasted longer than argument. "You can stand back, Mrs. Reed," the sheriff said. "We'll handle this." "You handled it once already," Abigail replied. "I remember how that ended." A few men nearby looked away. Jonah Reed had died in a hail of bullets outside the Dry Creek bank. That was the story the sheriff told. He said Jonah tried to rob the bank, kill a deputy, and flee town with stolen money. By sunset, Jonah was dead, the money was gone, and Sheriff Pike had become a hero. But Abigail never believed it. Jonah was reckless sometimes, stubborn often, and too proud for his own good. But he was no bank robber, and he never lied to her, not once. When the workers lifted the old marker, the ground beneath it gave way at one corner. A small patch of dirt collapsed into itself. "Careful," Abigail said, stepping forward. She dropped to her knees before anyone could stop her and brushed away the loose soil with both hands. Her fingers struck metal. There, beneath the base of the stone, was a rusted tobacco tin wrapped in oilcloth. The graveyard went quiet. Sheriff Pike moved first. "Mrs. Reed, hand that over." Abigail looked up at him, then at the tin in her hands. "No." She stood, turned, and pulled the tin against her chest. Pike took one step toward her, but the blacksmith, who had been helping with the graves, shifted into the sheriff's path just long enough for Abigail to pass. She walked out of the cemetery without running, though every nerve in her body screamed at her to do exactly that. She did not open the tin until she had bolted the door of her small house on the edge of town and pulled every curtain shut. Inside the tin was a folded letter, dry despite the earth, wrapped again in cloth. Abigail knew Jonah's handwriting the moment she saw it. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "Abby, if you are reading this, then they buried me before the truth could reach you. If Sheriff Pike still wears a badge, do not trust a word he says. I did not rob that bank. I saw who did, and that is why they came for me." Abigail stopped breathing. The letter went on. "Elias Rusk paid for the bank money to disappear, and Pike made sure the blame landed on me. If they have killed me, then they know I kept something back. There's a ledger page hidden inside the church bell tower, beneath the loose floorboard on the east side. Do not go alone. And Abby, if you can, leave Dry Creek before they learn you found this." At the bottom of the page, Jonah had written one final line. "If they call me an outlaw, remember this. I died trying to keep a worse man from walking free." Abigail lowered the letter slowly. Then someone knocked on her front door. 3 slow knocks. Sheriff Pike's voice came through the wood. "Mrs. Reed, I think you found something that belongs to the town." Abigail did not answer the door. She waited in silence, Jonah's letter clenched in her hand, while Sheriff Pike stood outside long enough to make the threat clear without speaking it aloud. When his boots finally moved from the porch she stayed frozen another full minute before breathing again. By dusk, half the town knew she had found something at the cemetery. Dry Creek had always been like that. News traveled faster than rain and usually carried more damage. Abigail burned the oilcloth in the stove but kept the tin and the letter hidden beneath a loose board under her bed. Then she put on her bonnet, slipped out the back, and walked the long way to the church. The building sat empty at the top of the main road, white paint peeling, bell tower leaning just enough to look tired. Reverend Cole had left 2 months before, claiming trouble with his lungs. Some people believed him. Abigail no longer believed much of anything in Dry Creek. The side door was unlocked. Inside, the church smelled of dust, old wood, and candle wax. She climbed the narrow stairs to the bell tower with one hand on the rail, and the other holding a lamp so low the flame shook with every step. At the top, the floorboards creaked under her boots. East Side, Jonah had written. She knelt and ran her fingers along the planks until she found one edge slightly raised. She pried it up with a pocket knife. Beneath it was a folded sheet and a leather pouch. The sheet was part of a ledger, torn from a larger book. Names, numbers, shipment dates, and amounts. It took her only seconds to see the 2 names that mattered: Elias Rusk, Gideon Pike. The figures beside them were larger than anything Jonah or Abigail would have earned in 5 years. The pouch held 3 bank wrappers stamped with the Dry Creek savings seal and one deputy's brass button stained dark at the edge. Abigail stared at them, heart hammering. Then she heard voices downstairs. Men. She blew out the lamp. Boots crossed the church floor beneath her. "You saw her come this way?" one man asked. "Yes." Sheriff Pike. Abigail sank to the floor and pressed herself against the wall in darkness, every muscle locked. "Search the pews," Pike said, "then the back rooms." Another voice answered, lower and rougher. "Elias Rusk. She's smarter than I expected." "She's a widow, not a gunslinger." "She's Jonah Reed's widow," Rusk said. "That makes her both." Their footsteps moved through the church below. Abigail held the ledger page so tightly it bent in her hand. At last, the men moved toward the rear hallway. It was the only opening she needed. She slid across the bell tower floor, found the narrow ladder that led out to the maintenance hatch, and forced it open with aching hands. Cold night air hit her face. The drop to the shed roof below was farther than she liked. Still better than staying. She landed hard, nearly slipping, then climbed down the rain barrel and disappeared behind the cemetery wall. She did not stop until she reached the blacksmith's yard. Thomas Bell answered the door in his undershirt, lantern in hand, surprise turning to alarm the moment he saw her face. "Mrs. Reed," Abigail held out the ledger page. "If I show you something," she said, "will you tell me the truth about my husband?" Bell looked over her shoulder into the dark, then opened the door wider. "Come inside," he said quietly, "before somebody sees." Inside, with the house still and his wife asleep in the next room, Thomas Bell looked at the page for a long time without speaking. Finally he said, "Jonah came to me the night before he died. He told me Pike and Rusk were moving bank money off the books and blaming it on freight losses. He said he had proof." Abigail swallowed. "Why didn't you speak?" Bell's eyes dropped. "Because men who cross Gideon Pike in Dry Creek don't live long enough to regret it." Abigail reached into her pocket and unfolded Jonah's letter. "Then we make sure they do." By sunrise, Dry Creek had changed. Not in the streets, not in the storefronts. Those looked the same. But Abigail could feel it. Something tense had settled over the town, like the air before a storm. Sheriff Pike was no longer waiting to see what she knew. Now he meant to find out. Thomas Bell spent the morning helping her think instead of panic. The ledger page proved Rusk and Pike were connected to stolen bank funds, but not yet how Jonah died. The deputy's brass button mattered too, but only if someone could place it at the scene. Then Bell remembered something else. There was a boy, he said. Noah Finch, telegraph runner. He was near the bank that morning. Where is he now? Bell hesitated. Buried. Abigail went cold. Noah died 2 days after Jonah. Fever, they said. Quick burial, no doctor. She thought of Jonah's letter, and the line that had felt strange on first reading returned to her. If they have killed me, then they know I kept something back. Something back, not everything. What if Jonah gave proof to Noah? Abigail asked. Bell looked at her. Or Noah saw enough to be dangerous. That afternoon, Abigail went to Noah Finch's mother with a loaf of bread and a lie about wanting to pay respects. Mrs. Finch was worn down by grief and too tired to be suspicious. While she made tea, Abigail's eyes moved over the small room until they landed on a wooden keepsake box near the fireplace. Inside were Noah's things, a slingshot, a pocket watch that no longer worked, a folded scrap of paper. Abigail opened it carefully. It was a telegraph copy, short, unfinished, likely written in haste. Saw Pike with Rusk behind bank before shooting. Jonah was shouting he had the ledger page. Pike fired first. Abigail's throat tightened. There it was. Not rumor, not instinct, not Jonah's belief. Truth. When Mrs. Finch returned, Abigail showed her the paper. The woman sat down slowly, as if her knees had given way. He told me he saw something, she whispered. He was afraid. The sheriff came by that evening. After that, Noah took sick. Abigail knelt beside her. Mrs. Finch, if I take this to the town council, will you stand with me? Tears filled the woman's eyes. If my boy died for seeing the truth, then yes. Word spread by evening that Abigail Reed was taking accusations to the council hall. Pike heard it too. He intercepted her halfway there. He stood in the road with 2 deputies behind him and one hand resting near his holster. This ends now, he said. Abigail stopped a few yards away. She was afraid, but fear had changed shape in her lately. It no longer made her smaller. It made her still. You should have let him lie in peace, Pike said. You should have let him live. Pike's expression hardened. Jonah was dead the moment he chose to meddle. So he was innocent. The sheriff gave the smallest smile. Innocent men die every day. Before Abigail could answer, Thomas Bell stepped out from the alley on one side, Mrs. Finch from the other, then old Mr. Talbot from the feed store porch, then 2 more townsmen. Dry Creek had not become brave, not all at once, but it had started to become less afraid. Abigail held up the telegraph slip in one hand and the ledger page in the other. Then say it in front of the council, she said. Say it in front of the whole town. Pike looked around and saw what she saw. Witnesses. For the first time, he understood that silence had stopped belonging to him. The council hall was full before sundown. Men stood along the back wall. Women crowded the side benches. Every eye in Dry Creek followed Abigail as she walked to the front with Jonah's letter, the ledger page, the bank wrappers, the deputy's button, and Noah Finch's telegraph slip in her hands. Elias Rusk arrived late, trying to look irritated instead of worried. Sheriff Pike came in last, jaw tight, badge gleaming in the lamplight like it still meant honor. Councilman Reeves called for order. Abigail spoke first. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She told them what she found beneath Jonah's grave. She read the letter aloud. She showed the ledger page with Rusk's name. Then she held up Noah Finch's paper and read every word. By the time she finished, the room had gone so quiet, even the floorboards seemed to listen. Pike stepped forward. "This is grief talking. A widow with a dead man's lies." Abigail turned toward him. "Then tell them why your name is on the ledger." Pike said nothing. "Tell them why Noah Finch wrote that you fired first." Still nothing. Elias Rusk moved to speak, but Thomas Bell beat him to it. "Jonah came to me before he died," Bell said. "He said Pike and Rusk stole from the bank and planned to bury the blame with him if he talked." Mrs. Finch stood next. "My son saw the shooting, and after the sheriff visited my house, my boy was dead in 2 days." The room broke into murmurs. Rusk tried one final push. "You'd trust gossip over law?" Old Mr. Talbot answered from the benches. Law stopped meaning much when the sheriff started writing the ending before the trial. That was the turn. Not one grand moment. Not a gun drawn, not a confession shouted to the rafters. Just the slow collapse of power when enough people stopped kneeling to it. Councilman Reeves ordered Pike's badge surrendered until a county judge could review the evidence. A deputy stepped forward, pale as flour, and removed it for him. Pike looked at Abigail then, not like a widow, not like a nuisance, but like the one person in Dry Creek he had failed to bury with the lie. Rusk left under escort before the crowd turned uglier than the council could control. 3 days later, men from the county seat arrived. The bank books were opened. Hidden transfers were found. So were missing funds. Pike and Rusk were taken east in separate wagons. Dry Creek never called Jonah Reed an outlaw again. A week after that, the town gathered at the cemetery. This time, Jonah's grave marker was moved inside the fence beside the other men, where it should have been all along. The old marker was replaced. His name remained. The lie did not. Abigail stood alone after the others left, one gloved hand resting against the new stone. Wind moved through the cottonwoods above her, soft and restless. She took Jonah's letter from her pocket one last time and read the final line again. "If they call me an outlaw, remember this. I died trying to keep a worse man from walking free." Abigail folded the page carefully. "You did," she said. Then she tucked the letter beneath the flowers at the base of the grave and stepped back. They had buried Jonah Reed as an outlaw, but they forgot something about the dead. Sometimes they leave the truth where only love knows to look.